Today, I wanted to do something that is probably going to be pretty painful, walking through my first project's codebase. Anytime you're looking for a job, but especially before you have working experience, one of the biggest things you'll hear recruiters say is the importance of building personal projects. This is something that I've talked about a number of times on the channel, but I realized that I've never really shown anyone the code behind the personal projects that I used to help me land my first few internships. Just to set expectations, this is not a good app. In fact, I made a video a little while back where I described this as the worst piece of software I had ever written. But it was good enough to get mentioned in the newspaper and to help me land my first job, which just goes to show that even if something isn't that good, there's a lot of value in making it and actually publishing it. And one more thing before we get started, there are a bunch of other code bases like this sitting around on my computer that I've never shown anyone. So if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and either leave a like or a comment so I know to make more videos like this one. I think I want to structure this in 3 sections. In the first part, I think it makes sense to walk through the code, just get the lay of the land, see what's going on there, how everything works. In the second section, that's when things get really fun. I want to walk through the storyboard, which is how I designed the UI, which has a lot of really serious issues with it. And in the third part, I want to just try using the app. I can't get it on the App Store anymore, but I do have a copy of it on my phone, see what works and what doesn't, if I can find any bugs, and just how this holds up after 9 years of not being touched at all. All right, I think the first thing that's interesting to point out here is the .mm and the .h files. I wrote this entire thing in Objective-C because this is before people were really using Swift. It might have been out and it was just brand new. But yeah, this entire thing was written in Objective-C, which I did not know coming into this. I only knew C++. You can see the original name for this project, which is Adding Educate America iOS. I originally thought I was going to split this into addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division apps as 4 separate apps, and then I decided to just put them all into one app together. The name was very bold. I guess I had large aspirations for what this app was going to do. I was going to educate America. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of files here. We have the app delegate, which is just automatically generated. We have the view controller, and I have the main menu screen. Now, the reason why there aren't that many pages here is not because the app is actually that simple. The app is not that complicated, well, I'll be honest. Now, the reason why there aren't that many files is because the entire app is crammed into the view controller. I did not know that you could have separate view controllers. Well, I guess I probably knew that you could, but I didn't know how to make them. And instead of trying to look that up to figure it out, I just put everything onto the view controller and was hiding and showing everything. So much of this app is just hiding and showing different things. So this file is about 1,400 lines long. And if I search here for hidden, there are 220 matches for the word hidden, which means over a 1/7 of the lines in this file are just related to hiding and showing different things from the screen. Because I don't have a concept of switching to a different screen, anytime the state changes, I need to hide and show all the different elements on the screen. There is also just a ton of duplication here, magic numbers everywhere, poorly named variables. It is a complete mess. By all definitions, it's a complete mess, which is why it has never been refactored. In the years after this, I tried a couple times. I came in and I was gonna rewrite things and do things a better way, probably not still the right way, honestly, based off of the way I wrote code back in college. And I just gave up every time because I didn't want to touch it, and honestly, I probably would have broken a bunch of stuff. All right, so let's actually try to walk through this in some kind of a meaningful way. No better place to start than view will appear. So view will appear is over 300 lines long, which I feel like that's over a 1/5 of the length of my entire file. Basically, a 1/5 of this entire code base is in view will appear. That feels bad. My idea of making this app dynamic for different screen sizes was basically just to special case all of the different heights that you could possibly want. So if the height was greater than 800, I said a bunch of things. If it's greater than 700, greater than 600, greater than 550, I don't really know why I needed so many different instances that are all specially tuned. Like, if you look at how many different things I'm configuring for each of these heights, is there really that much that's different between a screen that is 600 versus a height that is 550? I feel like these did not warrant this level of special casing, and that it should not have been done in this way, obviously. Parts of this are basically unreadable without going through the storyboard and figuring out what they mean. This whole section, vspace1, vspace2, vspace3, I have no idea what any of those mean. I mean, I know it's vertical spacing, but I have no idea what any of these individually mean, and they all mean different things. It's not like they're all supposed to be the same thing, because a whole bunch of these are set to 20, but then we have minus equals 50, plus equals 10, plus equals 93. That is such a specific constant. V space 8 and V space 10 should be plus equals 93 on that device size. I could not tell you what on earth that is supposed to mean. There's some other good examples in here of naming that probably seemed reasonable at the time, but now just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I have something that's just referred to as text view. I don't know what that does. I guess I just had one text view probably for the entirety of the app, so I just named it text view. Similarly, I have one thing just called text field. Don't know what text field is, but I have one text view and one text field, and they do something. These are two of my favorite things, my random color label and my random color label blue. I remember doing this. I know exactly why I did it, so I was looking for it. I did not know how to define a color in code, but I knew how to do that in the storyboard, which is I could just create a label and, use the picker to choose what color I wanted. So I would create labels of colors that I wanted, and I would just hide that label, so I'd have an invisible label, and then I would just grab the color, the text color from that label, and that's how I would define colors. So I wanted the specific orange color. I didn't know how to define it in code, so I just made a label of that color, hid it by default, and then that's how I got my orange color, by having an orange label hidden on the screen at all times. All right, so that's view will appear. Just in terms of overall code patterns, one of the biggest things that pops out immediately looking at this, and I'm sure you can probably tell the exact same thing, is just how much duplication there is. I clearly did not grasp the concept of reusable functions and just not copy pasting huge blocks of code and making very minor adjustments. Because fundamentally, if we look at this, I have pressed beginner, pressed easy, pressed medium, and pressed hard. You would assume, and you would be correct, these things do very, very similar things. But if we look at each of these, it's about, 594, about 80 lines long of something that is almost identical. This is not prototype code. This is code that shipped. This is the code that was officially checked in and sent off to the App Store that people were using when they used this app. Yeah. Here's a good method, switch screens, because remember, I didn't know how to actually switch screens. So the way I switched screens was calling a method, switch screens, and I would just check if the most recent screen was equal to 0, and then most recent screen would get set to 0. I don't even understand that. So current screen reflects the difficulty. So if I'm on beginner, it's 1, easy 2, medium 3, hard 4, no 5, stats is 6, pressed level is also 6. So I have two current screens that are 6, which seems incorrect. There's got to be some serious bugs in here. I did do a lot of manual validation on this. As you can probably guess by now, there is no automated testing for this. Obviously, I did not even know what automated testing was, or that existed probably when I made this. But I did do a lot of manual validation because I didn't want there to be a lot of bugs on this thing that I shipped. So while I'm sure there are bugs in here, they probably are not ones that you're going to hit in a lot of the mainline scenarios, or if they are bugs, they're probably pretty minor ones, because I did do a lot of manual validation. But just like reading this code, there's got to be bugs. So I want to find something that I think I do well in here, because there's a whole lot of stuff that I'm obviously really not doing well in here. But just even if the code isn't written well, something where it's like I can point to that and say, yeah, that was a good thing, that was worth doing. There you go. Input field changed. So basically this is just doing input validation, which you should always do input validation. You should not trust anything that a user is entering to be in the correct format, or that they won't do something malicious or anything. So this was my attempt at doing input validation. So the code not written well. I have, in some instances, I'm comparing the value as an integer and checking if it's greater than 1 million, and then I divide by 10. And then in other places, I'm just checking the length of the string if it's greater than 7 as opposed to checking the integer value if it's greater than 1 million. While I might not have done it very well, that was something that I guess I could tell from very early on. It was important that I do this kind of validation. My best guess is I probably, when I was doing my testing, I'm sure I hammered on it and I was just, I pop up a field and I just type a whole bunch of things and see what happens. And I guess in doing that, I don't know if I saw a crash or if it was just kind of really ugly that you could type this enormous string into a text field and it looked terrible. So good effort, very poor implementation. Before we move on to the storyboard, I think I want to check the main menu screen. I don't think there's going to be too much here. So clearly I carried over the same good patterns that I was doing in View Controller, where I check that the height is a certain level, and then I set my my VSpace 1 through 5 to be different values and all my font sizes to be different. Okay, so this is interesting. Prepare for segue. So this was probably the very first time that I had ever used a segue ever, because clearly I did not know what that was because I didn't know how to have multiple view controllers. So looking at this, my immediate thought is, well, this is a copy paste because I just have, maybe I found this on the internet. I have my detail view controller, which is a super generic name, and then I set some value equals to segue.identifier to int value, which means absolutely nothing to me. So I'm like, maybe I'm not using this, maybe this isn't too important. Let's go see what some value is on view controller. Oh, it's used in 44 places. And apparently it's determining what operation we have. So I can't believe my brain, I was in high school, but still my 15-year-old brain thought, we want some variable that's going to tell the view controller which mode we're in. What should we name that? Some value. Okay, so going back to the main menu screen, because got slightly derailed. Main menu screen, I guess that's, like I said, that's pretty interesting. I think the other big thing here is the help section. There should not have to be a help section, or it should not have to be that big for an app that's this simple, right? This should be something that is intuitive. It's being used by small children probably, who are not going to be reading a massive help section. And I wrote this in high school, but even though I wrote this in high school, some of the bits of this are just terrible. Beginner difficulty, simple questions for beginners. Easy difficulty, just a step above beginner. Medium difficulty, a good midway point between easy and hard. Who is that helping? I also decided to use colors to represent progress and how well you had done on a level, which obviously has some accessibility issues. But yeah, so that was kind of an arbitrary choice. I have a light blue indicator, which indicates that you can play that level, but you haven't played it yet. Then once the level has been played, if a sub 80% accuracy is achieved, the label turns red. So failure is under 80% instead of under 70%, which I'm sure was completely arbitrary. If it's between 80% and 100, then you will unlock the next level. And I love this sentence. At that point, you are considered to have mastered simple addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. However, we recommend you replay levels even at that point just to keep sharp. As if this app was written by a big team of people who are experts on childhood development who recommend whatever. It does sound better than saying however, I recommend you replay levels. It's just kind of funny reading that 15-year-old me was like, you know what, we'll sound a lot more serious and legitimate. We say, we recommend you replay levels. All right, I think that's enough looking at the code, have a pretty good sense of what that looks like. Let's go to what I think is gonna be the fun part of this, which is looking at the storyboard. Okay, so this is definitely the craziest part of the app, which is saying something considering the code that we just looked at. And I do wanna reiterate, before we look at this, that this app was on sale and people did buy it. And it was considered stable. I never got any bug reports and I did not personally find bugs back when I tested this. All right. This is the view controller. All of the views for the entire app, except for this one main menu screen, crammed onto this one page. Just think about this for a moment. You want to change one thing on this page. First, you have to even find it. So you've got this huge list of all of these different views on the side. So you just need to find, first off, what you even want to change. Then to be able to change it, you need to rearrange everything just to be able to get to it and make the adjustments that you want to make to it. I want to make a change to this thing in the background. Too bad. How are you even going to get to some of these things in the background? Not to mention all the issues there are with the constraints. So, I mean, I can already tell just from looking at some of these things that they're kind of messed up from being a 9-year-old project. But the constraints were not well designed on this project, which really shouldn't be surprising just based off of what we saw with the V-spaces. So now I can see V-space 11, V-space 2. It's still not any more clear to me what these are doing because it is such a mess. I can click on V-space 3. I don't know what V-space 3 is. I'm still not sure what any of these constraints are doing. I'm sure at the time I knew. But anyone coming and looking at this project now is just a huge rat's nest to unfurl. I also want to point out, because I think that's helpful, I did not know what a scroll view or a table view or any of those other types of things were when I was making this. I kind of learned the bare minimum of what I needed, which I did this a lot back then. So I learned how to make a label, a button, a single text view, single text field, and I just went for it. And that's great, you know, the initiative and the trying to figure things out and stuff, but it just would come back to bite you so hard later when you would design an app that worked like this, and then you have everything laid out in this terrible way instead of just using the mechanisms that Apple provides you to actually make an app that is accessible and works correctly and is not completely a mess like this. Okay, so I might regret this. I'm gonna see what happens if I try to fix all of the constraints on here. Okay, that actually worked a lot better than I expected. So this is what the app was kind of supposed to look like back in the day. Now, we didn't have notches back in 2015, so you know that obviously would not fly today. And then you can see up here, this is one of my random labels. So I probably have this hooked up. Yeah, my random color label blue is this. Basically, that was the color that I wanted for the you just unlocked something new icon. And instead of just defining that color somewhere else, I just made a label, and I could even set it to be hidden in here, and I don't even do that. I literally set it to be visible here, which is why I have to set it explicitly in the code that it's hidden. I don't know if that's just me. These look like two different shades of purple. Knowing me from back then, that's something that I probably would have messed up, that I would not even have a consistent color palette within my own app. So let's look at this. This is 5944C7. That's literally a completely different hex. 462ABB. So I have two separate purples that are being used interchangeably within the app. I don't even have a consistent color scheme. All right, I think it's time to actually try playing with this. I did put this on my phone, and I confirmed that it will load. I did not play with it very much, but at the very least, we should be able to play with this a little bit on my phone and just see how bad it is. All right. Okay, so this is pretty crazy. For starters, everything does seem to load correctly here. So let's just try playing a level. Okay, so this is what the UI is actually supposed to look like. I know it was probably hard to tell on the storyboard how anything was going to fit together. Yeah, right. Like that's kind of the issue with that storyboard, which is it is absolutely unclear what anything is supposed to do, and the code is so poorly written that you can't tell from the code. So this is actually what the experience of using the app is supposed to feel like. And then if I mess something up, it tells me what the correct answer is, and I don't let the user proceed to the next question until they have enough time so that they can read what the correct answer is. I feel like there's a good chance that some of these labels are not properly aligned. I'm just looking at this and I think they're centered, but just the overall design of this page is pretty terrible in terms of like the headings versus the text versus the stuff at the top, and then this button at the bottom that has an unusual amount of space underneath it as like a chin, which is different than the rest of the app. But in terms of misaligned labels, I mean, just looking at these, like beginner, easy, medium, hard, does this not look like there's a lot more space at the top than the bottom? Like, I feel like those are not vertically aligned within their views, and maybe that was just the font that I was using, Yeah, let's look at the stats. I've passed 3 levels, played 5, average accuracy of 69, perfect scores of 2. See, this seems much better laid out than the page that I was just on, where the headers and the content were not spaced correctly. At least this, it's kind of more obvious that like levels passed goes with 3, rounds played goes with 5. Like the spacing is definitely inconsistent. Also, the sizing of these things, I guess there's just a different number of elements per page. No, but it's more than that. So if you look at the bottom of help here, like look at that bottom help button, look at the bottom of like the bottom edge. My constraints are literally inconsistent, and it's the same at the top too. The top of the add button versus the top of the beginner button. I didn't even get those things aligned between the pages, which, you know, does it really matter? No, but that's the type of thing that drives me crazy today, that me from 9 years ago just did not get those things right, and that was just like, whatever. Okay, so yeah, if you do hard, you can get 3 things that you have to add together. So 4 plus 3 plus 8, 15. One of probably the biggest problems with this app, and I made a successor to this that addressed this problem, is that most kids, when they're doing math problems like this, aren't doing them horizontally. Like when you're learning how to do math problems, you're not generally doing them horizontally, you do them vertically. And just because I couldn't figure out how to do that, I just laid everything out horizontally. And I guess that's fine. Like, you know, when you decide that you're gonna buy this app, you look at that and say, is that what I want? But that is not the way that most kids, I feel like, are learning how to do their math problems. Let's look at the mixed section, hard. In theory, this is the hardest stuff. So this is actually kind of hard, right? You've got, well, I guess it varies. So you've got some addition, and then you've got some subtraction. So some of these actually are kind of tough problems. I guess just other things worth pointing about this app. You will find that there are absolutely no visuals or art anywhere in here, which is not surprising. Obviously, I could barely even write the code for it, let alone come up with visuals or have any sort of art in here. But it is pretty unusual for a kid's app, especially if I think back to what I was using when I was a kid, not to have any sort of art or visuals or anything. Like, this is a very, I mean, it's very basic, but a very plain app that has absolutely no kind of fun elements to it. I guess I picked kind of fun colors. Actually, there's, oh man, if I can find screenshots of that, I'll put that on the screen. The original version of this, I think, was just using blue and gray. It was like the most bland, drab color scheme ever, and then I switched it to using the green and purple, which at this point is, I think, that aged a lot better than what the blue and gray would have been, especially for something that's targeted at kids. The other thing that this doesn't have at all, which is not surprising for me having made this app, but then also just the era in which this was written, is there's absolutely no sort of gamification. Basically, I guess what I was thinking is either one, kids would really want to just do math facts themselves, which I did a lot of math facts when I was growing up, so I'm sure there are some people who just enjoy that for the sake of it. But for a lot of people, it's probably either your teacher or your parent or someone else is telling you like, hey, you need to do 5 levels of add today. And then they're gonna check the stats and check the levels and make sure that you actually did that. But if you think about a lot of the great apps and games and stuff, like they rely on gamification to make them compelling. So instead of it just being a chore and something that you have to do, you make it kind of fun so people actually want to keep using your app. So, you know, in this case, I don't know, it could have been things that you can unlock or prizes or tokens or anything else. There's all sorts of different mechanisms that you'll see these big apps using for gamification. Sometimes I think it really does go too far, but just something to kind of get kids excited about using this app so that it was something to look forward to and they wanted to do more of it, as opposed to what it essentially is, which is very utilitarian, which, you know, maybe some people like that. Like I said, some people did install this, not a lot of people, but in theory, there were kids somewhere who actually did use this thing, and to all of those kids, I apologize. So yeah, that is the first real app that I ever made, and it obviously was not very good, but it was pretty important for me because if I hadn't made this one, I wouldn't have made the apps after that, and those apps are what helped land me my first internship, which helped me land my other internships, and now the job that I have today. So I do look back at this really fondly, and it's also just funny to think about how bad this was and the fact that me 9 years ago had no idea just how bad this was. Like I said at the beginning, if you enjoyed this, let me know. I'm trying to do some experimentation with different formats, so if this is something you enjoyed and you want to see me walking through more of my awful early apps and then kind of progressing to stuff that I've done more recently, just let me know, and I would be happy to do those walkthroughs if there's enough interest. That's it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.